Experts have no idea who's responsible for this type of megalithic construction, but they do know who's responsible for some of these. And when they do know who is responsible, the carvings on the stones still remain a mystery. Because the mystery surrounding these other megalithic sites is the experts don't understand the carvings. How can these experts understand a culture, but not what this culture carved? Disregard. Fortunate for us, a new culture has been discovered that might answer some of these questions. This new culture that has been identified can be found on every continent and has been connected to the megalithic builders. Their fabrication methods are advanced and unknown. The abundance of artifacts may be evidence of a non-labor-intensive process. A wide range of materials were used, to include modern ones like aluminum. The artifacts adhere to a strict geometric standard. This standard not only applies to art and sculpture, but also applies to structures in terraformed areas. This consistent geometry with varying size is best described as a fractal. A small amount of evidence suggests they practice spiritual unaliving, which makes sense because their art style is very strange and dark. It relies heavily on light and perspective to be seen as intended. Effigies and general representations were used more often than the direct likeness of the subject matter. Worthy of note, an artifact matching a carved face on a megalith was eventually connected to this modern photo, shedding light on potential subjects of worship. There's also evidence that this culture was involved in some type of cataclysm. But finally, it was discovered that the materials used in all of these megalithic sites happen to be from that ancient culture, and that information enables all these megalithic sites to be connected. It also immediately answers why the experts have no idea about the carvings. It's because those carvings never belonged to the cultures to begin with. Okay, let's explore who. Surprise, we have no academic examples of a world culture. We do have recognized examples of feathered serpent worship in the Americas, but the geometry and art doesn't check out. What we do seem to have plenty of evidence of is a cataclysm. And for the sake of argument, let's just go ahead and say flood. A real popular source for the subject is Plato. Some creators have pointed out how well the Rishat structure's features match that in Plato's description. They've also pointed out how well the date range lines up with the Younger Dryas event. This is all compelling stuff, but they always seem to leave out this one important detail about the story. They forgot to mention that there were these individuals that called themselves gods. They divided up and ruled the whole world, making temples and sacrifices. Where's the proof? Because you can't have one without the other. When comparing bullet points, it seems that our newly discovered culture is a good candidate. There's also this quote which I believe is relevant. In summary, she states that there was this once great cult that worshipped the sun and the dragon, and those cults are best preserved in the Buddhist and Chinese countries. Well, that checks out because one of the statue fragments discovered seemed to look Chinese. When you quickly analyze other historic mysteries, you kind of see how they could be explained by this. There were so many that were explained well that it quickly became too many to list. I found it makes more sense to discuss what we should find. We definitely would find structures covered by sediments. We would also see structures in unfeasible or impossible locations. We should also find modern or advanced items scattered about the landscape. They would definitely be in various levels of that sediment. We should be able to see the artifacts from one culture on every continent. And those structures that you would find should be common across the globe. It's likely that everything would not be completely lost. So we should find potentially copied cultures. And how you would identify these cultures is there would be a regression in their technological timeline. Large areas might be totally covered in sediment. And if those were ever completely eroded, we would find the structures that were covered, and the culture you would find there should potentially match other examples. We would see large terraformed areas with their imagery and unexplainable rock formations. We would see materials repurposed by later cultures and possibly misidentified. Occasionally, we would discover older examples of knowledge predating their documented discoveries. We might see symbolism repurposed or modern examples. We should also find evidence and artifacts of a non-human presence on Earth. We could probably go on, but you can see how this is kind of adding up. But what it doesn't explain is why all these cultures stacked up these stones and kind of started doing their thing after this event. Well, thanks to this man's hard work, we might get some answers. In some of his early videos, he compares the similar accounts of these legends. They all had both human and dragon form. They all set up systems of worship. They all stated they came from a land that was destroyed by a flood. They all had advanced abilities and shared advanced knowledge. Really seems like those dragon guys are just those gods mentioned by Plato. With that, we can immediately assume they possess the technology to survive the event. This would explain why we kind of find similar spiritual practices around all these megalithic sites. It would also explain why they chose those stones specifically. The newly discovered feathered dragon geoglyph in the Mediterranean is evidence that they reached further than just the Americas, and likely other parts of the world. This new temple site being found at the geoglyph location suggests post-event people chose these locations intentionally. The one mystery I will address head-on is Göbekli Tepe. Bright Insight recently pointed out its proximity to the potential location of Noah's Ark. He went on to theorize that those remnants of humanity might have a hand in its construction. Seeing that it's supposed to be a record of these cataclysmic events, Noah's involvement would turn this into a two-team situation. But regardless of his involvement, or even his existence at all, if the story or the warning that it tells has anything to do with the story that I just told you, well, it would be catastrophic for many people's life's work. Hell, if people knew that the stones between those pillars were from that much older advanced culture, it would be problematic. This would easily explain the weird behavior by those in charge. And when you realize that comparable things can be found all over the world and in abundance, well, that would explain the poor treatment. They're not naive to this situation. They know what's going on. They probably see it as inconvenient trash. And if you believe in that sort of thing, well, it's the other team's trash.